God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Tyler, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. How you doing?
Yeah, doing good.
Good?
Good, despite the heat.
I know, it's freaking hot. It's crazy.
It is.
How's your summer been?
It's been good, man.
Yeah.
Been busy. You know, my son now is 14 months, and life looks a lot different these days.
Yeah.
But it's still enjoyable, just a new type of enjoyment.
I know. Everything changes once you have kids.
Dude, you couldn't live.
You can never, imagine how it's going to change your life. You know, you can read all the books and, you think about what it's going to be like you talk to other dads.
Right.
And you just have no idea until that baby comes out, what it's really like.
No, I know.
And how it's going to change your life.
Yeah. Yeah. And the effects of that. For me, I knew I always wanted to be a dad.
Yeah.
But where my past took me, I didn't know if I'd ever have the chance. So when I found out I was going to, I was super excited and had this idea in my mind of what it was going to look like.
Yeah.
And it resembles that maybe a little, but it took on a whole new scope.
Yeah, and it changes too, you know? It changes everything. And that's your first kid, right?
Yeah. So my fiance, she has an 11-year-old.
Yeah.
So I get to be a dad to her, which is awesome.
Right.
But that's a whole nother part of life, right? So.
And had you had exes that had kids in the past or anything when you were in your addiction?
No. I mean, if I was messing around with women that had a kid,
Yeah.
usually the kid was removed from the situation.
Yeah.
So, it was my first, this was my first serious relationship, my first relationship where there was actually a child, involved. And so, a whole bunch of new things for me here. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's awesome, you know, he never has to see you use, you know?
Oh, yeah. And her too, I'm blessed to have come into a picture where unfortunately for her, the dad was removed ever since she was 1, I believe. And for her to be wanting a father figure, you know? And so since I've been in the picture, she's never seen me loaded.
Yeah.
And that's just been a blessing because, coming from where we come from, sometimes we have rough households, people that we look up to that maybe aren't the most admired. And so to be able to have a good example, the best that I can, has been just a blessing knowing that I'm doing my best.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a whole different experience to be the stepfather too, and to play that role.
Yeah.
And it's an honor too, and it's an important thing to do and to be the role model for kids, especially if they don't have a father figure to look at, to be able to step into that role and do that. It's an honor and a privilege, and it's a big responsibility.
It is, and it's different than your own children.
It is,
because I know you can firmly attest to that. Yeah, it's a whole different dynamic almost.
It is a whole different dynamic, and you have to kind of learn the child and what they need and what do they want from you. You know what I mean? And also just being the male presence in the home and being a leader and showing them, regardless of what they want or expect, this is what a man is, and they see you and how you act and how you treat their mother, and it's huge, especially for women. Having a stepdaughter. I have stepdaughters too, and so they look at us as, they're looking at us as the male role model and how men are supposed to treat women by how we treat their moms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's very important to be sober and to carry, ourselves in a certain way and to be, following Christ and to be, walking that narrow road.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for me, it's a second chance, because I lost my daughter in addiction. I was incarcerated and lost custody, and we were still in touch and stuff, but it's rough, bro.
Not being there.
It's freaking rough, and so now I have a second chance to do it right, and we have another a son that never has to see me loaded either. You know what I mean? So. But let's take it back to the beginning. Are you from the Sacramento area, or where are you from originally?
Yeah, so born and raised in Sacramento. at the time, my mom and dad, they're divorced. So when I was 1, my mom and dad divorced.
Okay.
They lived in separate parts. My dad lived in Highlands, North Highlands, and my mom lived in Antelope, which at the time was like the suburbs of the area.
Yeah, yeah.
So, I got both those kind of cultural differences there. Going to my mom's, where people walk the dogs at night and do all these things, where my dad's, people are getting shot out in the front door.
Right.
But yeah. So I grew up in a divorced household. My mom remarried shortly thereafter to my stepfather, and they ended up having 3 children together. So I've got 3 younger brothers, all half brothers, and so it made it for a full house.
And how was that family dynamic, like being the half brother?
So my brothers never looked at me differently, and of course my mom never looked at me differently.
Right.
And my stepdad treated us equally like crap.
Oh, good.
So, yeah. My stepdad, he's 6'10", so he's this monster of a guy, right?
Yeah.
And what I remember from childhood was, hearing his car come home, kind of freeze up, turn off the TV or whatever you're doing and run to your bedroom. And when you hear his footsteps coming down the hall, you're just praying that he doesn't walk in the door. He was an alcoholic by nature, but he didn't need to drink to be mean. Right. He was kind of authoritative, disciplinarian, do as you're told, I don't want to hear you, no back talk. And so that was rough. I never felt like I got short-sighted in the discipline side, but he didn't show like love more to one or the other. He just kind of equally kind of treated us the same with that. So I was going initially to my dad's every Thursday and every other weekend. So that was my escape time. I'm my father's only child. So I looked at that time as like the time to get away, right? Yeah. And I'd come back with these stories of adventure to my brothers and how we go camping and how I'm doing this and doing that. And yeah, I ended up hating going back to my mom's house. It was the lifestyle was so different. Yeah. My mom's, it was chores all the time. My stepdad never did any chores. If he'd made dinner, clean this up, no talking at the dinner table. Now we're getting our ears pulled down the hall, and just, it was not a fun place to be. I used to dream of beating him up. You can imagine like this 7-8-year-old kid. I remember telling my grandma, like, I'm going to take him down. She like kind of looks at me and laughs, and she's like, I love your heart. Yeah. But,
So what was your dad's story? What did he do with his life? What was his career? What were his struggles?
So my dad was an alcoholic. He has always been an alcoholic. Yeah. He grew up with his dad. They owned their own sign business. So my dad did that for a long time, maybe stopped working for the business, but still worked in the industry. And so he always had a place for us to stay, wherever that was at. He always provided. Yeah. I think he did a little bit of meth in his time and tweaked a little bit, and never really saw too much of that. His thing was smoking weed and drinking. That was what it was the whole time. And my dad was very protective over me. Not to clash back onto my stepdad, but my dad found out one time that my stepdad was beating me up. And my dad went over there and put him in his place. And since then, it really didn't ever happen much. But that took some years. I felt some allegiance to my stepdad at the time. But my dad was just hard-nosed. Doesn't matter how big you are. Doesn't matter who you came with. You're going down if you're standing between me and whatever. And that's just how he was. Big, solid dude. Just didn't take no shit from anybody. I looked up to him a lot.
And did your mom struggle with addiction at all too, or no?
No. So from what my dad told me is that she dabbled a little bit in high school. Yeah. Have the occasional glass of wine maybe, but no, I never saw that. Her father though, actually my grandfather, on my mom's side, he was an alcoholic, and I think he did some other drugs in his time, but he went to Nam and came back, and we didn't ever see him much because he was always isolating, drinking, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So.
Just from my own experience, it seems like women that grow up in a home where their fathers are alcoholics, or, they see it in their household, they tend to find that in partners too. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I see it a lot.
Yeah.
So
that example that we're talking about, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah,
whether they realize it or not, or want it or not, this is comfortable for them because this is what they've known.
Exactly. Yeah. So. Yep. Exactly. So you saw it in the household. You experienced that alcoholism firsthand.
Yeah.
And what were you into growing up? Did you play sports or anything like that?
Yeah, I played baseball growing up. I was born with a heart condition.
Okay.
So they wouldn't let me play football.
Yeah.
Didn't like me playing basketball. At least, I played in my off time, but never could get a signed waiver from the doctor to let me play school sports. So did the whole AYSO soccer league, baseball, that kind of stuff. Just kind of just normal rec sports.
Yeah.
Wasn't ever played competitively, but baseball runs in our family though.
And what was your first experience with drinking or using?
So, going back to where my dad's was the escape, right? It was always a fun place to go. My dad was one of those parents that said, hey, you can drink, but you're drinking at home because I want to watch out for you. And I remember it was probably like 14, maybe 15 when I drank. Yeah. We go camping all the time. He said you could have a beer or whatever it was. And so, some of the earliest experiences I had was, going camping and sitting around the campfire and having a few beers and having my buddies come with me, and we'd all get drunk and giggle together and go walk out in the sand dunes at night and play tag or capture the flag or whatever it was. And it was a blast. It was like, this is fun. Like, I like this. Yeah. It was, looking back, it was another escape for me. Just like going from my mom's to my dad's when I didn't like what was going on there. This was me getting away from Tyler when Tyler didn't like who he was or how he was feeling. So it felt like a gift at the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about that parenting decision to allow your kids to drink as long as they're, in the safety of a household? Because for me, it's like, it wasn't allowed in our house, but I had friends that it was the same thing, and I understand the philosophy behind it. Like, we don't want you out there in the streets drinking, behind wherever, some building. We don't want you drinking in cars, drinking and driving. If you're going to drink, at least drink over here, so I know that you're safe. I understand that philosophy, you know what I mean? But also it's obviously enabling that behavior, right?
That's my point.
And it's often they're providing it too. And it's not just turning a blind eye, but then you're providing it.
Yeah, I'm not spending my allowance on it.
Yeah, right. And you're making it okay, you know what I mean? And I don't necessarily have anything against alcohol in general. It is what it is. If you can use it and not abuse it, all the more power to you. It's just it doesn't work for me, and it's not something I would recommend anybody do. You know what I mean? Because of the detriment it has to your life.
The risk.
It harms so many people way more than it helps. And the risk versus reward is just not there. And it's definitely just not something I would allow my children to do. When they're 21, they want to make that decision. That's on them, But as far as in my household, there's no way I would enable our children to drink. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think, so my philosophy on it is I won't allow it to be done in my house, especially underage, let alone when they're above age, because me and my fiance don't drink,
right.
So respectively, we don't like people drinking around us. Sometimes we can't avoid it. But when it comes to my children, I would like to be able to have the relationship that, hey, it's not okay that you're doing that.
Yeah.
If you do find yourself in a position where you're doing that somewhere else, I want you to know that you can call me, that I know what it's like. And even though it's not okay, you can always call me and I can come pick you up. Yeah. And if you're in a bad situation, doing something you shouldn't do, you don't have to worry about what I'm going to think. Your safety is what matters, And so that's the thing is that, when you're saying that your children can drink in your house, you are enabling it. Because they're looking at you as a parent to see what's okay and what's not okay.
Yeah.
And for me, what it looked like was, it's okay for me to drink here. I still left, right? I still left the house and snuck out. Kids are going to be kids. But that's also telling me that wherever else I go, it's okay for me to drink too.
Yeah.
So it kind of sets the precedent, going forward. So I'm with you on that. I don't think it's okay.
Yeah. So as soon as you started drinking, you liked the way that made you feel. You got you outside of yourself. So where did it go from there? What was your high school experience like?
So high school first led to taking my friends camping with me. We'd get drunk. be at my dad's house because I started, I think it was around 13 years old. I was able to make the decision to live at my dad's permanently. I forget what age it was, but there was an age where it actually mattered what I said now. So I could go live wherever I wanted. So I stayed about 90% at my dad's. And it was bringing friends over to the house, drinking, going camping trips, drinking, which soon led to if nobody was even coming over and it was me in my room, I'm going to grab the bottle out of my closet and drink. Because this was just the way that I knew how to. I didn't realize it at the time. It's not that I was feeling bad or down or depressed. It was just, this is what I knew how to do. I've developed this kind of habit, this habitual pattern of just like, oh, my off time, I'm going to drink.
Yeah.
Because, what's the point in just being sober? I might as well change the way that I feel. This will make it more fun.
Yeah.
And so that progressed more into smoking weed. Started smoking weed. And once I smoked weed, it really opened my eyes up to, okay, I can change the way I feel in different ways. It isn't all alcohol. There's different things that do different stuff. And I ended up taking my brother's ADD medication, his Adderalls. My brother didn't like it. And I was like, well, shoot, if he's not going to take them, I'm going to take them. And next thing you know, I'm drinking, I'm smoking weed, I'm taking prescription medication for ADD. And I am just riding whatever high I can get. At this point, I am just looking for the next thing because life kind of lost its meaning for me as I got into more of high school. I didn't care about grades, didn't care about sports anymore. I care about changing the way that I felt. So smoking weed after school every day, grades plummeted, went to continuation school twice. They let me back for junior year, and then I went back to continuation school senior year. So all of my dreams and ambitions just went down the toilet. What mattered to me was changing the way that I felt as much as I could.
Why do you think that was? Do you think it was just the progression of the disease, or was there something causing you to want to escape, something going on at home, or was it just...
It's hard for me to pinpoint that down. But I remember this vision that I used to have when I was a child. Not a child, I was a teenager. And I used to have this dream that if I could just go away to a spot where nobody knew me, life would be perfect. Just to escape from everybody. I would be that guy that they'd be like, well, where's he from? Or what does he do? And I would just keep my distance and I would just be that loner. And looking back, I don't really know why I had that dream, but that was just like bliss for me, was just to escape everything. And I had a mom who loved me, a dad who loved me dearly. It's not like these people left my lives. They were still there for me. Even with sports growing up in school, my dad would build a 5-gallon bucket on stands so I could throw baseballs into it. He was all about supporting me and doing things. So, I think it was a combination. Maybe the lifestyle that started to develop within me, but also me just trying to escape myself. I wasn't happy with who I was or how I felt. And I liked who I was more when I was loaded. Yeah.
What were some of the dreams or ambitions that you had as a kid, or what did you want to do? Did you have any vision of the future?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an engineer. I love math, and honestly, if you'd have asked me when I said that dream, I couldn't have told you what an engineer was. It just sounded cool, right? I remember my stepdad when we were kids, he's like, you got 3 options in life: doctor, lawyer, or engineer. Yeah. And engineer sounded like the best option for me. So I was like, I'm going to go to Stanford, become an engineer. Yeah. And it's crazy that happened, right? Because even when I know what it was, I look at what that is today, and that would be right up my alley. I love creating, I love math, I love problem solving, and so that was the first dream. The second dream was to be a firefighter. I wanted to be a firefighter. I want to be that guy that helps people. It just, I never could see myself working in an office. So it was always this outdoors thing, living out in the woods if I could, Yeah, basically.
And did you have any connection with God or a higher power growing up, or were you brought up in church, or what did that look like?
My mom was the foundation for that. She took us to church when we were young, I think, to escape my stepdad and chaotic household at the time. I remember I was 7 years old, and we were sitting there in the pews, and they said, whoever wants to come up and get baptized, get baptized. And my mom said she looked down, and I was gone. I was running up the aisle. And remember wanting to get baptized, and I was so excited. It's like I didn't really fully understand the depth of what my Savior meant, but I knew that God was there somehow. I knew that I could rely on Him. And our relationship, as a child, right? It's, you don't think too deep about things, but just knowing that He was there, I wanted that. Yeah. I wanted that relationship.
And how has that relationship changed over time, would you say?
So it's definitely over time has went from becoming close to estranged to being able to like rebuild that relationship. For me, obviously through my high school years and my using years and the prison and the jail and all that stuff, it kept me at a distance because I wanted to do what I wanted to do.
Right.
And, fortunately, which I'll touch on later on in the story, prison actually was what brought me back. It stripped me of everything and only allowed me, if I wanted, that close relationship again.
Right.
And so,
it's a trip how, like, the issues in our life and, like, trauma and chaos, like, being humbled, will bring you back to your creator, and, like, I know for me, it was all I had, you know what I mean? Like, when I didn't have anything else, God was there, and comforted me and was...
When you needed him most.
Yeah, when I needed him most. And he was always there.
Mm-hmm.
He was just always there. Whether I was reaching out or not, he was there. And I was being guided and helped. And, like, I've been in so many wild instances that it should have gone way worse, that I felt protected. Looking back, I was protected, like, and guided through these situations, and I think it's for a purpose, and I feel that same way for you, God has a purpose and has a plan for us, and we get in the way of that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, self-will.
Self-will gets crazy, And so let's kind of touch on that. So when did your self-will get wild? Was it after high school?
Self-will probably got wild closer to junior high. Wasn't using at that point, but stealing. Just finding ways to act out.
Yeah.
Yeah. It and then obviously gotten worse, but yeah, high school probably kind of started to hit its peak.
Mm-hmm.
But to touch on what you were talking about this mess we create of our lives, right, and this chaos. It reminds me of the story of Joseph. While they're not paralleled in my sense, in Joseph's sense, he gets imprisoned. He gets accused of rape, and he ends up meeting his brothers later on down the road. There's this big famine, and Joseph gets put at the head, second-hand, right-hand man, and stores up all this food, and then his brothers and his dad end up coming to him for food, and they're saying, hey, can we, please borrow some food or whatever it was, and they can't tell it's Joseph yet. And he ends up giving them the food and kind of confronts them. And what he ends up telling his brothers is he says, you meant it for evil, but God meant it for good. And I can find that same kind of instance within myself. Like the things that I was doing, like even though I meant it for evil, God's plan, God's will always sees through. Like even though we feel like we're in control or we've made a mess and we can't think, God's just like, what do you mean? This is all part of the plan.
Yeah.
You're right where you need to be.
Yep.
And it doesn't give us an excuse to continue to make bad decisions and make a mess of our lives.
Yeah.
But God can make the best out of anything.
Yeah. And he'll use all of our experiences for his glory. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Working, through us to do things like this, and like use our experience, strength, and hope to help somebody else that's still lost in that dark place. Like all of the experiences that we go through are all for a reason, and whether, all that crap was God's plan or not, like our self-will got us into a lot of stuff, but all that can still be used, you know what I mean? Like he'll still turn all that pain into purpose,
right.
And turn it into a positive thing. So what happened after high school? Where'd you end up?
So after high school, I actually went to live with my grandfather, my mom's dad. My situation at my dad's house at this point was a 2-bedroom duplex with 7 people living there.
Yeah. And
it was just really tight. My grandfather, for all of his faults, knew the situation I was in. He's like, why don't you come live with me? So out to Rio Linda I go. My grandfather's not drinking at this point. He's kind of stopped, trying to get back on track. And it was shortly thereafter of living there that I started doing heroin. So it actually started with Oxycontin.
Yeah.
All right, I was working at Walmart, and was doing crank, crystal, and one of the guys at the sporting goods counter was like, "Hey, have you ever tried Oxy?" And I was like, "No." He's like, "I used to like uppers too, but trust me, downers is where it's at. And being the good addict I am, okay, let's try it." And I loved it. I mean, to be honest, I passed out the first time I did it, right? But when I came to, I was like, "Oh, that felt good." And it was right at the end of the Oxy craze, so it wasn't readily available. Mm-hmm. And one of the buddies I played baseball with, I'd heard that he had Oxy, and so I called him up, and he's like, "I don't have Oxy anymore, but I have black." And maybe it was me being naive, but I was like, "Okay, whatever. Yeah, if it does the same thing." He's like, "Yeah, it does the same thing." I'm like, "Bring it over." And it was shortly thereafter I'd gotten high off of it that I realized that's black tar heroin.
Yeah.
And to be honest, one of my first thoughts after I did it, it was my health class in 9th grade. Him showing me all the posters of everybody that it looks like from a drug addict. This will be you. This will be you. And my first thought was like, this isn't that. This isn't. I'm not losing my teeth. I'm not going crazy. And that justified the behavior to keep going. And so,
and were you just smoking it, or?
Yeah, just smoking it. Yep. And living at my grandfather's, eventually he ended up catching me smoking some heroin, and he's like, "I knew I could smell it."
Like blah, red-handed.
Yeah, I was in with foil in hand over by the closet. He opened the door. Totally unlike him, but I guess he could kind of pick up on some stuff, right? Like the way I was acting.
Yeah.
And
you think you can hide it?
Yeah. Right? Oh, I thought I was the smoothest. You never know.
Yeah.
And
true.
Dude, yeah, he caught me, and I told him I wanted to get clean. And it was about 2 days of withdrawing that I went into his room, stole $100, and left on a bicycle.
Yeah.
Ready to figure it out. Doesn't matter as long as I can get high again.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Yeah.
That it just hijacks your thinking, man, where you're willing to make these crazy decisions behind it to getting used no matter what, like regardless of the consequences.
Bridges we burn, doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Like people you love and that love you, like your own family, people that put you up and, shelter you, feed you.
Do anything for you.
I know. Yeah. And it's, it's a slow progression, like that addiction to opiates, it's not, you're not going to make that decision immediately, but pretty soon, that habit turns into a physical addiction, and it really does change your brain chemistry and like the way you're thinking and your impulse control and all that stuff, and like when you're itching and you're hurting, withdrawn, dude, anything is possible.
Yeah.
Like you'll pretty much do anything, and people do.
Yeah.
Murder, whatever. Like people will do anything to continue on that path.
Yeah, and the crazy part about it too is because finding myself in that situation countless times.
Yeah.
Right. Going into it with, I've got enough to last a day. I'm gonna stop after this. I'm gonna set myself up right with these things that I'll be all right. You get to that point where, even when using becomes an option again, your mind tells you, I just need to get well one more time.
I know.
Just once more. I just don't want to feel like this right now. I'll deal with it tomorrow.
Yeah. That was a big one for me too. It was like, tomorrow didn't even matter.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, I just need to change the way I feel right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I don't care if I'm spending my last $20 and I don't have any gas or food.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah. Like, tomorrow I'll figure it out. Yeah. But right now, I need to change the way that I feel.
And that wasn't even, for me, that wasn't even a hard decision.
Right.
Like, for me, that was just a given. If I had the money in my pocket, it was being spent.
Yeah.
I'll go beg for money at the gas station if I have to. Like, the rest will work itself out. Right now is what matters.
I know. It's wild.
That was the lifestyle for a long time, man. I think it was about 3 years that I used consistently until I caught my first jail term. At this point, I was breaking into people's houses now, which, in all honesty, backtracking a little bit, I had already picked up that behavior from smoking weed. I was breaking into people's houses just to smoke weed. It's kind of addict I was. If I liked something in the way it made me feel, there was nothing getting in the way of it. So, breaking into people's houses to get money, to smoke heroin, and it ended up me being in somebody's house.
Just random people, or how were you going about that?
Yeah, well, I thought I was slick, right? So I'd go to Walmart. I'd steal a bunch of high-end items, stick them in the garden center.
Yeah.
and take them. And then I would go door to door acting like I'm selling them. And then nobody answers. And then I start to like look around, you know, find a window that's open, whatever I needed to. I was never those addicts that really like went for violence right away. It was always just like the sneaky, conniving, stealing, you know.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was in this house and I thought somebody had come home. I heard the car pull up. So I went out the back gate. Went out the back gate to the next yard. Those people were home and I have a mask on and everything, and they chased me down, and cops finally ended up catching me, and there was nobody that was coming home. It was the next door neighbor. So it was kind of like, you know, it was an opportunity. It felt like that God was creating for me to be able to get clean.
Yeah.
You know, and I did. I got clean. It sucked. I went to county jail, and did I remember this is the first time I'd actually withdrawed in 3 years, you know, from starting, and I couldn't stop kicking, you know,
spasming.
Yeah, and just like just wanting to I wanted to knock myself out is what I wanted to do.
Miserable.
And I remember them saying, if you feel like hurting yourself, please let an attendant know, and they'll come get you. And I said, just get me out of this cell. So I did that, and they threw me in this little green
turtle suit.
Yeah, turtle suit, handcuffed me, and then threw me in a room for 10 hours till psych got there, and they're like, oh, this guy's crazy. This guy's not crazy. He's just withdrawing.
Yeah.
And then they just sent me back on my way. And, dude, it was hell.
Yeah.
It was hell, but I got through the withdrawals, you know, and did 6 months in county, caught a strike. The judge told me, don't ever get in trouble again because you'll be going to prison. I was like, you don't need to worry about me.
Right.
I'm definitely not coming back here.
Right.
And that was my mindset, getting clean and not using anymore.
Yeah.
Right. It was why would I want to go back to that?
Right.
I'm going to rebuild my life.
And did anybody introduce you to recovery in there, or?
No, at that time, I didn't go to any AA or NA meetings.
Did you know of it?
To be honest, I don't even remember. I was in a different mindset at that time.
Yeah.
I ran with the woods in there, and were, you know, push-ups, dot crew, you know, just like kind of in that mindset, young mindset, getting strong and buff.
Yeah.
And
How
that's
old
gonna, I was 19 or 20.
Yeah.
Yep. So it was young, you know.
So you got out, you had clear intentions to change.
Yeah, I actually got on a work project.
Okay.
Let me on a work project, and never showed up. Went right back to using in like 3 or 4 days. Had some old friends hit me up.
Yeah.
You know, and I actually think I hit them up. I don't even think they hit me up because they didn't know I was out.
Yeah.
And I was just calling just to check in, see how they're doing, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, well, let's go. Let me come pick you up. And I was off and running again. And, yeah, I ended up actually turning myself in. My grandma took me in. She's like,
so they put a warrant out for you.
Yeah, warrant out for me. And once again, I wanted to get clean. So now this is where this idea of getting clean is coming in. It's like, okay, I'm going to turn myself in.
And why was that? Because you didn't like the physical repercussions of withdrawal, or the negative repercussions of what was going to jail and all that, or what was the idea behind getting clean?
I think the behavior and the consequences of that behavior.
Yeah.
It was more of don't have anything to show for my life.
Yeah.
And you know, what has my life become? Even up to this point, you know, this isn't the way the life's supposed to be. You know, this isn't what's supposed to be happening.
Yeah.
Like, I need to make a change. I need to get a car. I need to do these things. And I think that was a driving factor behind it.
Yeah. That was something I experienced too, is like, wanted something more, you know what I mean, than what I was doing. And like, I knew I wasn't living up to my own potential, you know what I mean, and what I could do. And like, I had dreams and ambitions, but couldn't freaking stop.
Right.
You know, that powerlessness was crazy.
No, and even when we stop using, right? Like, that's, you know, looking back at the nature of the disease, like, you know, the drugs being just a symptom of our problems.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, they end up becoming our major problem at the time when we're getting high, but, you know, what's leading us back to that when we have a little bit of clean time? You know, like why is the dog returning to its vomit? You know, it's just like, it's just insane. You think about it, you know?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I created more problems through my addiction, you know, than I was given. You know what I mean? Like, I created a lot of trauma and drama through my decision making in the streets, and like the things I was doing and doing to people. And yeah, it became to the point where I was using to change the way that I felt because I didn't like who I had become.
Right.
You know,
and you don't want to feel that.
I had created all these issues, you know, and so the drugs and alcohol became the solution to the way that I felt. Mm-hmm. Right? I wasn't using for fun anymore. You know what I mean? I was self-medicating with these drugs and alcohol. And the drugs and alcohol were a problem in themselves, you know, or like my whole life revolved around it, right? I was the getting and using of more. What am I going to do to get it, to get money? Like, what am I going to do once I have it? All these things, it all revolved around drugs and alcohol.
Right.
But at the end of the day, some people, you take the drugs and alcohol away and they can smooth things out, you know? Whereas for me, you take the drugs and alcohol away and I still got issues. Right. You know what I mean? I have unresolved trauma and things that I need to deal with that have to be dealt with in order to move forward. Like, these are reasons why I'm drinking and using. You know what I mean? To change the way that I feel, because I don't like who I am. I don't like my circumstances. I don't like the decisions that I've made. I don't like where I'm at in life. Right? And so that is a problem in itself, you know, and that's the blessing of recovery, right? Is like it gives us a outline on how to deal with these things. Well,
and that's what's so hard, I think, when coming into, even if it's just clean time, not even recovery, right?
Yeah.
For me, I got addicted to the lifestyle as well. And like looking back and like as we're talking, it's like, I think fear of failure was a big thing for me. You know, if I am living this lifestyle where I'm literally burning everything to the ground every second of the day, well, I don't have any expectation on what my life looks like, except for another bag in my hand, you know? And it totally keeps me from feeling like, oh, I'm letting myself down. And like you talked about covering up the feelings, like that's what kept me using for so long, was the wreckage that I caused because of my addiction. That's what I didn't want to feel. I didn't want to feel all the people that I hurt. I didn't want to feel all the people that I robbed, the parents I let down, and how I can't go over to anybody's house except during Christmas and they have to watch me when I'm over there. Right. You know, it's a horrible cycle, man. And it's like getting out of that cycle, you have to be diligent. Yeah. You really do. Because like as my story progresses, you know, multiple times I got clean. Multiple times I had the opportunity, but I was just kind of lackadaisical about it.
Yeah. So where did it progress from there?
So next stop on my journey is prison. Stole a car and caught me out in front of a smoke shop. They took me to jail, found out I was doing prison time, and that was scary. I was kind of like worried like what that was going to look like. And
yeah. And how old were you?
I was 22, I believe, maybe 21, right around there. Yeah, I can't give an exact date.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually before I went to prison, I had open heart surgery. So they had to replace a valve. So I got my whole chest plate ripped open and everything, after I got out of county that time. And yeah, I kept using, you know, obviously get a prison term, and had to do 16 months. So I got 16 months out on good behavior. And through that 16 months, I told myself that there was no way I'm going back. Like, this was resolute for me. Like, seeing what it looked like to be gone from my family for that long, to be restricted to this area. I mean, don't get me wrong, you know, human beings, we can adapt to whatever situation, right? Like, aside from the shell shock, like, what I come to find out is, like, I wasn't on any high-level yards, but for me, where I was at, anybody can do prison time. Like, it's not a badge of honor. Like, it's a place that you go and stay, and you play handball and make spreads and work out, and you don't have any responsibility.
Yeah.
So got out of prison and had swore that I was going to change. You know, I got a job doing some tree work, bought a truck, you know, and started drinking again. Actually, the first thing I said, drinking's not bad. Drinking's legal. I can drink. You know, but looking back, it's like the behavior. Well, why did I want to drink? You know, why did I want to change the way that I feel? And that led me using again. And that led me to another prison term. And
is that for another burglary or what would you?
Yeah, so this one was for going to somebody's backyard. I was actually driving around in a stolen car. I had 4 of them at the time, parked in different locations, sleeping in them. And went to somebody's backyard. Had been up for a few days, and they had a shed in the back of their yard where they had some power tools. And so went, got the power tools, and I looked up. There was a camera. I flipped it off, got into my car, and left. And next thing you know, the cops were at my door. Well, back it up a little bit. So it had been 2 days since I'd done that burglary, among many other burglaries. And I was up all night. And I lived in a in-laws quarters on my dad's place. So he's got a house, and I've got a little in-laws house. Mm-hmm. And we had one of those telephones where the number shows up on the TV, and we're all linked to the same TV. So it must have been maybe 7 a.m. I see a call come on the TV, and I was like, "What is that?" You know. Mm-hmm. And I don't even have a phone in the little house. I just can see that there's somebody calling, and I see that it gets answered. And I go up to the big house, and I'm like, "Hey, who was that calling?" And my stepmom's like, "Oh, that was the." I don't have a big house number for Tyler. My stepmom's like, "Hey, who was that?" I was like, "Who was that calling?" She's like, "Oh, that was the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department." Oof. And I was like, "All right." So I grab the house phone, I go back to the little house, and I call the number back up, and I'm like, "Hey, who is this?" They answer, and I was like, "Hey, who is this?" And they're like, "Well, this is El Dorado County Sheriff's Department. Tyler, is that you?" I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "Well, stay where you're at. We're coming over to your house right now." And I told them, "I'm not at home." Mm. They're like, "You're calling up us off your house phone, you know?" And I was like, "Oh, right." You know, it just shows the delusional thinking. Like at the time when I'm using, I can't tell the truth. You know? Like it's just a habitual lie after lie. And so I was just like, "All right, well, come on over." And so they come over, pick me up, and I'm off to prison again. Mm. You know, and
how'd that feel?
It sucked, but at the same time, when I got to where I was going, I felt like a relief.
And were you back on heroin? Or what were
Yep. Yeah. I was smoking heroin and meth, so those were my two primary drugs of choice. I had to have heroin because of the withdrawals, but I needed to have meth to go out and commit burglaries. You know, so it was just this cycle. And that's the thing about the high too, especially doing those two drugs, is you're consistent, like constantly trying to chase the perfect medium. Mm-hmm. You know, you're smoking meth and you're getting up there, "Oh, I'm too high, I gotta take some heroin," and go down. And then you're going back up again and going down. And dude, it's just a horrible, horrible lifestyle. So the relief that came from being locked up again kind of outweighed whatever consequences were, because that's how badly just I wanted to change. So when they offered me my time, I didn't even argue with them. I said, "Send it." You know, got me another term, 2 years, doubled up for 4 years. And off I go. They sent me down south to Chino for a little while, and it was this time around in prison that I finally was feeling like I was hitting my rock bottom. You know, the crazy thing about rock bottom, right, is that you can always go deeper.
Yeah.
You feel like you're there, and then you're like, throw the shovel in, I'll go a little bit deeper. Mm-hmm. The idea that my life was just going to pan out was becoming less reality and more fiction. Mm-hmm. You know, I had this idea from looking at my family. They all have perfect lives. Like, yeah, they got the rocky things here, but they got houses, they got cars. Like, my life is going to become that.
Yeah, like, eventually you're just going to grow up.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to grow out of it. It's just a phase.
Yeah.
And it wasn't happening. And so, stripped of everything, with absolutely nothing except a little tote that I carried all my stuff in, I started reaching out to God, breaking down, asking for His guidance. Yeah. And the blessing that came from that, man, was it was the opportunity to be removed of all distractions,
right,
and have nothing but to focus on, but Him. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, aside from the current state that the present situation that I'm in right now, that was the happiest time of my life, was being in prison.
Yeah, no, I can attest to that too, and like, it's something about. Because I've thought about this and why was it like that? And it's because you have nothing else to really do.
Right.
Like you're locked in a cage. And for me, like I spent a bunch of time in the hole and it was like, there's nowhere to go.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And nothing to do. And if you're trying to get sober and like you're trying to make this connection, you're in the right place, because you can focus, you don't have all the distractions and the stresses of life pulling you here, pulling you there. Like today it's so many different things going on, distractions, cell phone, all, the world is very distracting. And in there, it's like, you have the time, everything's taken care of. Yeah. You know where you got to be at what time, your food's ready. Like, you're depending on what you do in there, if you want to gangbang, whatever, but everything is structured in there. You know what I mean? And so you have the time and if you have the willingness,
that's it.
it's the right place to be. And I feel like God knows that. You know what I mean? And he puts people like us in those positions at the right time when our heart is open and willing to make that change.
Right.
And he's there, bro. He's in those places.
Oh, yeah.
And he's waiting.
Heavy.
He's standing at the door. You know what I mean? Like waiting for you to open it, you know? And that, so I had that same experience. Like I was relieved to be there, and I was happy because I didn't have all these other stresses going on. And like, it was just me and God and the Bible and you know, and recovery. And like, I felt like I had direction, and I felt like I had peace and serenity for the first time in years.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I knew that I was okay here. You know what I mean? Like I believe I've been forgiven, and like I had a clean slate between me and my creator, right? And that's all I wanted was a clean slate. Right. I wanted to be forgiven, and I wanted a second chance, you know? And I knew that as long as it didn't matter, like if I ever got anything back, like how much prison time I was going to do, it didn't matter if I got my daughter back. I just wanted to feel okay.
Right.
Like inside, I needed some peace and serenity inside of my heart. And as long as I could have that, then I could do something with myself. But if I can't feel okay, then I'm constantly trying to stuff that feeling. You know what I mean? I'm trying to fill that hole, and only God can fill that hole.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no, absolutely, man. I can totally relate with that because I remember I came to a point on that last prison term where cases were coming up, getting ad booked. You know, there's something about like when you're getting out and your date is there, you get kind of nervous, you know, but leading up to it, I remember just talking to God and just saying, hey, even if you want me here for the rest of my life, I'm okay with that. Like, that's how much peace I had in my heart, because it's true. Like, that's all I wanted. I wanted peace here, and I wanted peace here, you know, and being able to walk and talk with God, right? It gave me that connection that filled that hole that I'd been searching for my whole entire life. And the problem was I never even got a chance. Really. I knew better. Like, no, God isn't going to do it. You know, this is going to change the way I feel, or this is going to change the way I feel. You know, it was all self-will, and I just never given him a shot. And so that was the first time since I was a kid, man, walking up that aisle to go get baptized, 7 years old, you know, and like it was unreal. And, you know, for me, walking out with that, I felt like I was untouchable.
Right.
You know, and not in a vain or puffed up way, but just being like, you know what, it's going to be all right. But what ended up happening, right, was once I got out in this world and this busyness and distracting things all around me, I let myself get pulled away. And I started getting caught up with the things of this world and what I thought mattered, and led me right back to using once again.
Yeah.
And the final stop in my using times, at least, you know, for that process, was getting in on a violation, and my probation officer, my PRCS officer, was asking me if I want to go to rehab. I think I went to rehab once before, but I was on Suboxone, and just didn't really get anything out of it. And I said, yeah, you know, I'll go. Can I get out early? She's like, yeah, you can get out early. I said, sign me up. You know, I'm excited to go. And come to find out, they're not getting me out early. And I'm praying about it, and I feel God telling me, he's like, well, how bad do you want it? You know, are you only going to do it if there's an incentive for it? Like, you changing your life, isn't that a big enough incentive? And so I ended up going and went to this rehab for the first time, and it wasn't what I expected. People were using in there.
Okay.
And
where'd you go?
Granite Wellness.
Okay.
Yeah, over in Auburn. It just closed down recently. And so I came out with a little bit of size on me, right? And working out, started actually like looking at the program. Like, I'd heard some meetings here and there through this point, right? Went to meetings in prison, went to meetings in jail. Not really fully comprehending like what recovery looked like, right? But just hearing about it. And so I remember hearing a meeting there once. This guy named Justin L. And he had beat a prison case, and I could relate a lot with his story, right? And I was like, man, if this guy can get clean, you know, it's the first time I realized like the predicament that I was in, like these other people were in, and somehow they got through it. Because at this point, I know that it doesn't matter what I have materially. Something is getting me to go get loaded every time. It doesn't matter what I acquire. It doesn't matter if I reach this level, get this job, get this girl, get this house, get a kid. None of it is going to keep me clean. Yeah. I'm what gets me loaded. And so really dived into recovery and kind of became house boss there. And people were using, and I was trying to be the nice guy. And I said, hey, if you guys are going to use, don't let me see it. Don't get caught with it. Do what you're going to do. Just keep it out of my face.
Yeah.
And that resulted in a 19-year-old, my bunkmate above me, overdosing one night. I had to wake up and find him. He just asphyxiated in his sleep. And I just talked to him the night before, And so, seeing what that did, changed protocol there at the house. And, it was a rough time. But I stayed clean. It was that gift of desperation where for me at this point, I knew what I wanted and I knew how to get there. And it was through the program and it was through my relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And so keeping those two things intact, I just kept pushing forward. It got me into a tea house, got me into the career that I love, being an electrician. Started working for that. Got my own place, started to get all the things, right?
Yeah.
Was really connected, was going to meetings, working steps, and then got complacent. Mm-hmm. Got complacent and started working out a lot, right? And thinking that, my size and how good I looked mattered.
Yeah.
And that became more important than anything else and just making money. And I got loaded again, man. After 19 months, I relapsed. And
what happened? Like what was
so there's a what I've heard from other people is, you can sometimes convince yourself I can use once. Yeah. I can make this happen once. For me, I said, fuck it. I don't care. Whatever happens, I want to change the way that I feel, and I don't care what the consequences are. And
was that kind of a slow progression to get to that point?
So
was it one thing that set it off?
No, it was probably a slow progression. So for me, what it looks like before I relapse, I start to get irritable. I get discontent. I isolate. Those things were happening for me. There's, a few times like with my boss where I was going to give him a piece of my mind and just people in general. Yeah, I had a sponsor at the time who, he's a great sponsor, and I'd come to him, and I'd be pissed off and I'd be like, this old dude at the quick stop, said something to me, and he's like, I'll hit an old man, like just making light of the situation, right? Trying to show me like, hey, it's not that big of a deal. But in my mind, like, no, it's a big deal, like you're not going to disrespect me or whatever it is. And it just led to being discontent, irritable, getting to a point where I was fed up. Mm-hmm. And my life no longer felt like it had much purpose. Mm-hmm. I had stopped moving forward. I'd stopped progressing, and I was just kind of maintaining, right?
Yeah.
At least spiritually. Spiritually has always been a big thing for me. If I feel like I'm moving forward, I can feel good about myself. If I'm making the right decisions, I can feel good about myself. But when I'm just maintaining,
yeah,
And
what did had you worked the steps or?
No, so I'd started to work the steps. I was working out of the flat book, and was just kind of taking it as like, this is something that I need to do. Right, this is something that they're telling me I need to do, but just kind of answering questions. Right, not really putting my heart into it.
Yeah.
And so, it was kind of just like playing the game there at the end for a little bit. I was like, I show up because I'm supposed to show up, or I do this because I'm supposed to do this, but not really feeling happy, joyous, or free. Mm-hmm. Just kind of thinking that I could stay clean on my own will. Mm-hmm. And that's not how it turned out. I ended up going back out, lost my job, going back to stealing. I was very lucky I didn't catch another prison term, honestly.
Yeah.
And, what it looked like for me, I went back into rehab, left rehab, came back, left. It was just this whole, couldn't make my mind up, right? I'm back in this cycle again. Mm-hmm. And funny thing about the program, they talk about being open-minded. And I've been closed-minded to a lot of things, even clean and even in recovery. Mm-hmm. And one for me was Suboxone. Mm-hmm. I was like, I've taken it before, you get loaded, all this stuff. But for me at this time, I could not stop using. Mm. And so I had decided to get on Suboxone. I said, you know what? Okay, I'm going to give it a try. And that was the first step for me into getting clean. So I was on Suboxone, didn't go through rehab this time. I'd left and was just trying to maintain with where I was at. I was changing the way that I felt with Suboxone. I could feel it, you know. And
how many milligrams were you doing?
I was on 4 milligrams. Yep.
Which is like 2 strips a day or something?
No, so they have 8 milligram strips.
Okay.
They have 4 milligram strips, and they have 2 milligram strips.
Okay.
So to put things in perspective, there at the rehab, there were people who were on 3 8 milligram strips a day.
Yeah.
So 24 milligrams.
Yeah.
Previously, I had been on 8 before, years ago. So I was on 4, and I think I might have gone as high as 6 a couple times here or there, because I was not perfect in it. You know, I'd be taking this stuff and then being like, oh, I want to feel a little bit more, you know?
Yeah.
And so I'm taking the Suboxone. My fiance now, but my girlfriend at the time could tell. You know, she's an recovering opiate addict. She could tell that there was something off with me, and she swore that I was using it. And that pissed me off. You know, don't you know I'm not using? I'm taking these strips.
Yeah, I mean, you're taking opiates.
Yeah, exactly. My pupils are dilated. You know, and at the time, I'm normal. What do you, just the delusion of using, right? Like we feel, I don't know if you know, having opiate past, if you've ever been nodding out and somebody's like, hey, you're falling asleep. Like, no, I'm not. I'm not falling asleep. I'm wide awake. Mm-hmm. You know, it's just this delusion that we create about ourselves.
Yeah. And, you know, with the Suboxone, you feel like, you know, you're doing the right thing and like, you know.
Because the doctors are prescribing it, right?
Yeah.
Like
yeah. And, you know, this is a big reason I wanted to have you on because I went through that whole procedure too, and for me, I found myself like wanting it, you know, because I abused Suboxone on the streets.
Right.
Like I used it to get high when I couldn't find anything else. I used it way more than I should have when I was trying to take a break off of heroin or whatever it was. I would snort it back when they had the pills, all that, you know? And so I liked the way it made me feel.
Yeah.
You know, it gives you a cool little buzz. You know, it's pretty mellow, but it changes the way that you feel.
Definitely.
You know, and so for me, and I know this is a big problem for a lot of people, is I was on an insurance program where it was like, there's all these rules. Like you have to be in this program, you have to be doing this, you have to check in, you have to be in this outpatient in order to get your prescription of Suboxone.
CDRP?
Through Kaiser, yeah. And so I went to rehab and they put me on Suboxone when I really didn't even need it. You know, I was struggling with alcoholism at the time.
Right.
I had kind of traded heroin for alcohol and became a hardcore alcoholic. But they asked me like, hey, I think I might have tested dirty for heroin because I was still using here and there, but I wasn't a day-to-day user anymore. They asked me, are you a heroin addict? I'm like, yeah, I'm a heroin addict. Been a heroin addict for years, you know? And just the way your drug addict thinking works, you know? And all of a sudden I'm on Suboxone. You know, I don't even really actually need it. Now I'm in rehab. I'm on Suboxone.
Every day.
I get out of rehab and there's all these contingencies behind staying on Suboxone and I can't fulfill it. You know, I can't make it to these places, whatever. I can't keep my insurance. And all of a sudden I don't have Suboxone anymore, you know, and now it's like you take my crutch away and I don't have the tools necessary yet to like deal with addiction. You know what I mean? And this is a problem, not just for Suboxone, but for a lot of people that are struggling with mental health issues too, is like, it takes a lot to be able to like make it to doctor's appointments. You know, you got to have transportation. You have to have a working cell phone.
You have to have the time.
You have to have the time.
Yeah.
You have to have the money. You have to have insurance. Like there's a lot that goes, like a lot of people just think like functioning normal people in society can go to a doctor. They can make appointments. They can keep appointments. They can show up. They have insurance and they can take their prescriptions as needed. And as the doctor says, right? Whereas drug addicts and people with mental health issues, like a lot of people can't keep a cell phone.
Right.
You know, I can't keep a freaking cell phone number on. You know, I don't have a permanent address. I can't receive mail. I don't have a vehicle. I can't get to the doctor. You know what I mean? I don't have transportation. I forget. I'm I'm lost. All of a sudden, I'm not on my medication, and I'm freaking mentally ill in the streets.
Yeah.
And there's nobody that's going to just take you to your doctor's appointment.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So people, especially with mental health issues, it's very hard for them to stay on their meds. And when they're on their meds, they function. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? But they can't stay on it long enough. You know? And for me, it was like, as soon as that Suboxone was gone, I'm right back to where I started, you know?
Well, dude, the Suboxone, so having been through the Suboxone withdrawal, because I successfully got off of it, you know, and for me, I have to reset my clean date for that, because for me, it was changing the way that I felt. Mm-hmm. But the Suboxone withdrawal, you know, if anybody's looking to kick or they're looking to get clean, getting just clean, cold turkey is the way to go. It's difficult. I'll give you that. It's difficult. It's been done countless times. You have to be desperate to the point to where you're willing to have somebody lock you in the room or whatever it looks like, right? But Suboxone for me, so I'd been taking the Suboxone and found out I was going to be a dad. So my fiance comes up, she says, hey, brings these little like baby booties in. I'm like, what? And it had this mug that says Papa Bear on it. I was like, no, seriously? And just thrilled, you know? And one of my first thoughts is, I don't want my son to see me like this. You know, and I talked to some people in the program about it, and they're like, hey, I highly recommend you get off of it. Yeah. And so then started the taper withdrawal. And what that looked like for me, I only talked to one person who's ever done it successfully. So those of you like that have taken Suboxone, you know, out there, it is not as simple as, oh, I'm going to take this and get off of it. Because the withdrawal is extremely difficult, way more difficult than heroin because it's so drawn out. Yeah. So you have this half-life that's in your system. And with heroin, you know, you can kick for 3 days. Yeah. Those 3 days are going to suck. And then afterwards, you'll deal with some anxiety, some stuff coming up where it's going to be hard to just feel content. But the main withdrawal is going to be gone, whereas Suboxone stays in your system so long, it makes it extremely difficult. So every week I was tapering. So I went from 4, you know, I tried to jump from 4 to 2 and felt like I was going to go crazy. It was too much. So I had to go 4 to 3, then 3 to 2, then 2 to 1, then 1 to 3/4.
And were you doing it yourself or was somebody helping you?
No, I was doing it myself.
Because I couldn't do it myself. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I couldn't be trusted with a prescription. Yeah. You know what I mean? So for people that are out there, like, you got to really be honest with yourself and with other people. And if you find yourself digging in that pill bottle when you shouldn't be, like, if you're really serious about getting clean and sober and like tapering down, you need to have somebody help you.
Well, and that's the thing too, is, you know, people can use it for multiple, you know, areas, but like everybody's their own person. Everybody's different. We can use that and to be like, well, I'm different. I'm going to be able to do it myself. My story isn't the most common story. Yeah. You know, Blaine, like, your story is the most common, where we have trouble regulating what a dose is, right? And that's why it helps to have somebody that's close to you, but I don't recommend too close, because you have somebody like a spouse or a partner, somebody you're living with. That person's going to give in if at some point you're like, hey, I need it. Versus like a sponsor or somebody that you can trust that really doesn't have too much skin in the game. Right. Because really it's about how bad you want it, how bad you want to be clean, because you have to set these things up to where you cannot allow yourself to fail. Right. You know, because the worst part of this process, right, is like throughout my whole addiction, it's all about how I feel about myself. Right. My self-worth. Yeah. I've always struggled with self-worth, self-love. I still struggle with it, you know, by decisions I make, things I do. But when you decide to get clean and your heart is in it, I'm going to stop without a doubt. Yeah. And then you go back, what do you think that does to your self-worth?
Oh, it just kills it.
Yeah. I can't put any time together. Yeah. I know how badly I need this. I can't stop, you know. And
guilt and shame.
Yeah. All that comes in. And then addiction just uses that to propel you forward further into your addiction.
And then you get the fuck out.
I can never get clean.
Whatever.
Yeah. You know. And so for me, it was extremely hard. I talked to multiple people in recovery, and I talked to one gentleman in particular who had gotten clean, and he advised me what he did. And so I checked in with him regularly. Each week I was dropping a dose to the point where I was having to take this little sliver every day. And it went from like this big of a sliver to that big of a sliver. Like, it wasn't much. I was having to just knock it down just a little bit. And finally it got to the point where I was just like, I went to work, I had the sliver in my pocket in case I needed it, and I went to like 11 to 12 to 1. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to take it. I'm not going to take it. And it was hell. It was hard. I went back on that idea multiple times. You know?
And the habit of taking it.
Oh, too. Yeah. Every day.
You know, it's like the process of the whole thing, you know.
And you think about it, and when you're taking something every day, whether it's an illegal drug, right, or Suboxone or something that's prescribed by a doctor, like you think about like, oh, if I need to go on a trip, I have to make sure I have enough, or did I bring it with me today, or did I take it, you know. And that in itself can be all-consuming. When you feel like you're bound by something, you know, it never feels good. Like that's the reason we got clean, is to be able to be free. Right?
And that was what I wanted, was like, I don't want to be held by anything. Right. You know what I mean? I don't want to have something to feel okay. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to be able to be me and like be sober and not need a crutch to rely on to get me through the day. You know what I mean? And but yeah, the whole process of like cutting it and opening it and taking it and sucking on it, and like the whole thing, you know, like a lot of us in addiction have ceremonies behind using. You know what I mean? We do the same ritual every time we smoke heroin, and like the whole thing, you know what I mean? And it's just that addictive behavior. And so that's a big part of smoking and chewing tobacco too, is like just doing it.
Right.
It's not even so much it's like it's a habit, you know? So that's part of it too.
Yeah. I remember for the first year, I couldn't really have any aluminum foil in the house.
Right.
Because it was a trigger. Yeah. You know, and like it goes again to like, you know, what is your determination to stay clean, right? Yeah. Because you tell yourself like, oh, it's fine, you know. For me, when it comes to me getting clean and staying clean, I'm taking all the outs out of it. Any possibilities, any chance, like, you know, for me, I dealt with drinking when I was younger, right? Never became a full-blown alcoholic. But the reason I don't drink today is because it's too much of a gamble. Oh, yeah. Like, I wouldn't drink today, because even though I didn't have a problem with it there, like, I'm an addict. It doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like, I will abuse it if it changes the way that I feel. So it's just not worth it.
The risk versus reward is just not there.
Yeah. And, you know, you get to a point like, you know, like my life today or your life today, like, I wouldn't trade it for anything. My life I have today, like, even though it's ups and downs.
Alcohol can't make it better.
Yeah. You're always stuck with the same problem. Yeah. It's just.
Nothing can make it better. You know what I mean? Like, but God, and staying on the path, like service and, you know, progress, right? Spiritual, physical, all, like that's the only thing that can make our situations better. Drugs and alcohol aren't going to do anything but make it worse.
Right.
You know, and a lot of people want to use when times are good too. Oh, yeah. You know, it's a party, it's a celebration, right? And you just got to remember like where that's going to go. Yeah. You know, it starts as a party, but it ends in pain.
And you know? Absolutely. For me, I was the type of addict. It didn't matter how I felt. Yeah. Like, I used it for everything. Yeah. It didn't matter. And I love that phrase, you know, the longer you stay clean in recovery, the more you realize like where these sayings come from, like the just for today. Like, I have to use that consistently sometimes because whatever it is I'm going through, even if I'm not like thinking about using, like with whatever I'm dealing with, right? Because a big driving factor behind me is my feelings, right? I don't know how to deal with my feelings. When feelings come up, I use, whether they're happy, right, or whether they're sad, or I'm stressed, or whatever it is. I'm not used to dealing with my feelings as they come up. And so, just being able to just be mindful of that. And when things come up, you don't have to look at it for a long-term situation. You just go like, you know what, I'm just going to get through today. Yeah. You know, and it give you that enough time and space to be able to come back fresh the next day.
Yeah, no, it's a huge thing, especially early in sobriety. It's like, you're just not going to use for today. Yeah. Like whatever, tomorrow will bring whatever, you know, but for right now, I'm just not going to use, you know? Yeah. And something you said, you know, about like that willingness and we're just not going to use no matter what. Right. Like, it doesn't matter what happens. It doesn't, you know, whatever the circumstance, good, bad, or indifferent, like, putting drugs and alcohol into the situation is only going to make it worse. Yeah. You know, it might change the way that I feel right now, but long term, it's a problem. Drugs and alcohol are a problem.
Yeah, and my sponsor said something to me my first go around in recovery that really stood out. He said, everything is temporary. The good feelings, the bad feelings, right? And so sometimes it's not only just looking at the situation like, oh, this is going to make it worse, but that the situation is going to get better. Yeah. Like when it's bad, right? Sometimes we get so consumed where like, this is it. This is how it's going to be. It's just not the truth.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk about using no matter what, you know, dealing with reservations, you know, I lost my father to alcoholism. He died this past February. And what it felt like to walk through that was extremely painful and difficult. You know, he didn't just go away in his sleep. You know, he rushed to the doctor's office, was bleeding out. I had to go in the office and see him bleeding out. He made it through and was just hooked up to all these tubes and machines and everything. And he was on my reservation list for a while. It was, you know, hey, if my dad goes, I don't know what I'm going to do, right? But it's that whole using no matter what. The great thing about recovery, right, is you stay around long enough, you meet enough people, you realize everybody's been through everything. Yeah. Maybe not as one, but collectively. Like, you can find somebody that's gotten through something loaded, whether it's losing a parent, a relative, a brother, sister, losing a child, you know, losing a job. You know, it just... That's the thing. It's all relative. Pain is all relative. You know, for somebody, you know, losing a job or losing a girlfriend might be the huge weighing down burden, you know. Yeah. But whatever it is for that person, you know, somebody's gotten through it clean, and that's what gave me hope.
Yeah, you don't have to use no matter what.
And that it's gonna get better. Yep. Like, even however painful it feels right now, one thing I guarantee you is that it won't get better if you use.
Yep. And it's okay to feel.
Yeah.
It's okay to feel.
Yeah.
Like, I spent so long, like, running from my feelings. I didn't want to deal with these emotions. I didn't know how to deal with these emotions, you know, and I just wanted to change the way that I feel, right? I don't want to feel. Like, my favorite thing about drugs and alcohol, especially heroin, is I can get to the point where I'm basically unconscious.
Yeah.
Where I'm just sitting there nodding out, like, not in this world. Mm-hmm. And that's what I liked, because I didn't want to feel.
That's what we went for,
To oblivion, drink to oblivion, used heroin to oblivion, right? To the point where I'm no longer really even conscious of the way that I'm feeling. And in sobriety, like, I had to learn how to feel. And it's okay to have those feelings of sorrow and grief and anger, you know, and even all the negative and all the positive, you know?
Too, yeah.
And to be able to, like, be present with those emotions and, like, process it and deal with it, you know. And in sobriety, we learn how to deal with it, right? Mm-hmm. And how to process these emotions without having to drink and use, you know. But I want to go back and finish this thing with Suboxone. So you finally made that decision, like, this is it. I'm not, you know. Mm-hmm. How did that feel?
It felt scary.
Yeah.
You know, it felt scary. For me, what it looked like was committing to take baby steps. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't this thing like with heroin, right? Or like, this date I'm going to stop. Yeah. But it was like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take a little bit off.
Yeah.
I'm going to take a little bit off and check and see how that feels.
Yeah.
And it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It was. But just like with anything else, it kind of evened out.
Yeah.
And so I kind of kept that motion going where it was just like, you know, I'm going to take a little bit more. And there was times, believe me, where I wanted to take a little bit more. I was just like, you know what? This doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
I can just take a little bit more and I'll feel right? But the beautiful thing about the steps, and I relate this to the steps because it's like anything positive in our lives, that when we're consistently making changes in the right direction, when we get to a point, we get to a spot where we're like, hey, I don't want to throw all those good decisions away. Let me just make one more, and then I'll make one more, you know, and you build up that little bit of self-worth. As addicts, for myself, I can only speak to, but as an addict, self-worth is the biggest killer. Mm-hmm. Because it's a self-centered disease, right? And how I view myself is very important. You know, how I view myself, that's what kept me out using. But I kept consistently cutting down, and got to a point to where it was at the very end, even though I wanted to take more, the need to get off of it was greater. Mm-hmm. You know, and where I'm at today, you know, they say your kids can't get you clean, and I believe that to be a true statement, but your kids can help keep you clean.
Sure.
You know, and so being off Suboxone today and having my daughter who's 11 and my son who's 15 months, it's like
gives you purpose.
Purpose, man. Yeah. It's not about me anymore.
Yeah, right. And I think it's important what you're saying about the self-worth, and something to go along with that is, like, when you are able to make those right decisions and, like, get through a situation that would have gotten you loaded previously, but you make the phone call, you go to a meeting, you do a hard exercise, you read some literature, whatever it is that you make the right choice and you don't get loaded, then it builds confidence. Right? Like you overcome that situation, you let it play out, and you don't get loaded. And then all of a sudden you look back and you're like, man, made it through that.
Yeah, I can
Didn't get loaded.
Yeah.
And then boom, that's a tool in your toolbox. Whatever you use to get through that situation, that you can go back to that, right? What are some of those things that you use today to in your toolbox that you lean on?
So for me, always getting into step work, right? Getting out of myself is huge. Going to a meeting, and talking to my sponsor. I mean, those 3 things right there are huge for me. And to add to that, probably rises close to the top is service.
Right.
So anytime I can get out of myself, like in service, all my problems kind of seem to go away. Whatever it looks like.
Yeah.
And just real quick to go back on what you were saying there about making these right decisions and building and being like, oh, I can use that again. For me, I remember wanting to get loaded. When that feeling came up, when I actually wanted to get high, I always got high. I would do great in a situation where my life's going good, all these things, right? Didn't want to get high, I wouldn't get high. But when I wanted to get high, it always happened. And that scared me to death because I was waiting for that to come. And when it did come, I was able to reach out, to go to a meeting, to talk to some fellow addicts. And it got me through that. And it was that experience there that I showed to myself, I can get through that clean.
Yeah.
Okay. And it just empowered me going forward. Like, I have these tools. Yes, I have these tools, but just the ability, because it's not like I'd really thought about it prior to that, but my track record showed me that, yeah, you'll do great when you can't get high or when you don't want to get high, but when that feeling comes, you're going to use. And like, there was a lot of fear coming, but it showed me, like, even going to this thing with my dad here, it was like, whatever my feelings are, like, there's a workaround, and I need to prepare for the workaround, and I need to put in the effort. Those feelings aren't just going to go away, you know. It's big, man, being able to have a toolbox with tools in it.
And those feelings are temporary too, you know. Like you said, it's like just because a thought comes into your mind doesn't mean you have to act on it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Just because you want to get loaded doesn't mean you have to get loaded. Right. You know what I mean? Just because you feel that way doesn't mean you have to act on it, you know? But you also need to set yourself up for success. Like, a lot of times as addicts, we have problems with impulse control, you know? So we're not hanging out with the people we used to hang out with, you know? Because when they break out that bag, then impulse control comes into play, right? Especially in early recovery. It's like you need to be on your guard and like giving yourself the best opportunity to win. And just understand that, like, those feelings will come and go, you know? Like, some days I get that feeling like, man, a freaking beer sounds great, you know what I mean? Or smoking weed or whatever, but it's just a thought.
Right.
It's just a thought.
It's temporary.
Yeah, and it comes from a drug addict brain, and I know that. And if you start to really lean on that thought and it starts to grow, then you need to, like, take a look at what's going on, you know, and then take action to avert those decisions, right? If sobriety is what you really want to do, right? And if you're willing to do whatever it takes to get and stay sober, then you're willing to do whatever it takes. And sometimes that means going to a meeting. Sometimes that means calling your sponsor. And those are things that I wasn't willing to do before, you know? Right. I knew that I should have. Like, I remember, you know, knowing I should be calling my sponsor, and instead I'm freaking pulling into a liquor store, you know? Whereas, like, today, I'm willing to do whatever it takes, you know what I mean? And that means being willing to be uncomfortable, you know, and being willing to do whatever I need to do to stay out of that spot,
and,
you know?
And I don't know what it is with it being so uncomfortable, but
yeah,
when you're in a spot with feelings or thoughts, it does, at least in my experience, right? It's so uncomfortable for me to call somebody and talk about it, or to go to a meeting. Like, even more, like, if I'm chilling at home with nothing to do and like, I'll go to a meeting, it's fine. But if I'm thinking about, using or any like bad behaviors, right? It's so hard for me to go to a meeting. The way my disease works is it tells me, oh, you're not going to hear anything you need to hear anyways, But I have to combat that thought and be like, you know what? I'm going to go. Because like for me in early recovery, meetings were a godsend. Like it was a place where I could go any day of the week. I remember having my own place, and it was a Saturday night, and I was thinking to myself, it's Saturday night, and I've got a job, and I've got a car, and I've got nowhere to go. I'm just sitting at home. Like, what kind of life is this? And then I thought about it, and I was like, I'd go to a meeting. It kind of felt like that lost kind of place. Like I felt alone, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to a meeting, and it just changed my whole perception.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about a power greater than ourselves, right? Like the second step, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Wherever anybody's at, like my personal higher power might not need to be their personal higher power. Like, but whatever it is, to find a power greater than yourself is the key to making progress forward, right? Because in the beginning, for me, even though I had this relationship with God and had this past, like I knew meetings and the program was a power greater than myself.
Sure.
And so being able to tap into that, it kept me out of me. Because me is a dangerous place, man.
Yeah.
It just...
No doubt.
Yeah.
So how was your experience with the steps, and what have you learned? What was the big takeaways?
So currently I had to redo my steps recently. So, one thing that I like to speak out about is sponsorship and the importance of sponsorship. My previous relationship with my sponsor, while I love him, solid individual, what he was giving me through the step working processes wasn't what I needed. And I allowed myself to get content for a while and was just like, oh, it's fine, and so I had to make the decision recently to change sponsors. And even though that meant restarting my steps, I had to practice some humility and realize what I needed best for me. I need to have the right person in my corner. And so the step working process in itself has been freeing for me. Right? Just like we talk about making the right decisions over and over again to build self-worth, the steps do that for me. And I've talked to people that the steps do that for them too, because what we're doing is we're not just taking away the drugs and just being like, oh, okay, we're fine now. Like we're getting into some root causes of maybe some problems and issues and dealing with shame and guilt. That way we can clean that slate as much as we can. And then when some stuff gets on it, just cleaning it back off again, and it's tough. It's painful, but growth is, and that's the whole thing of this process is that it can get uncomfortable and it can get painful, but the positive always outweighs the negative in this whole process. It has brought me more peace. Absolutely. It has brought me a lighter load. I used to carry this backpack around all the time, and people would offer, hey, can you carry that? I got it. And I'd be stubborn and bull-nosed and not wanting to give it up. But I've taken a few rocks out of that backpack lately, and it just feels a lot lighter, man.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then go back to that, like, I just wanted a clean slate, and like I had issues that I needed to work through in order to have that peace, and a big part of that was like forgiveness, forgiveness for other people, but mainly like forgiveness for myself, is what I was searching for. Forgiveness for the things that I've done and for not living up to my own expectations as a man and as a father and a spouse and all those things, and through working the steps, it brought me closer to God and it brought me closer to myself and like taking an honest look. And it's hard, dude. It's hard to take an honest inventory of yourself and of your past, but if sobriety is what you want, like we have to be willing to do whatever it takes, and part of that is opening up that book, and like taking a look at the things that you've done and putting it on paper and sharing it with another human being.
And it's so worth it.
It is. That's the
really
thing. It is freeing,
Yeah. No, it really is. So the whole step working process, like it's, I don't know, man. I wouldn't be able to do it without God. I mean, I feel like in one way it does. It connects you with God, that higher power. And the next part of it deals you with you. And for me, I stuffed a lot of things. And you're only fooling yourself if you think you can get clean and just continue to stuff and not deal with everything,
Yeah.
And that's the thing too about it is it's it's atonement.
Yeah.
You know, we think about the things that we've done wrong. And for myself, I think about the penalties for those things. And sometimes I found myself using because I'm a piece of crap. I'm not worth it. Don't you know the things that I've done? You know, I can't make up for those things. And like step work and process is part of making amends, right? So it's like with the steps, you get the actual physical release of what you've done.
Mm-hmm.
And then with your connection with your higher power, you also get that spiritual release, you know? So it's like, you can't get one without the other. Like this is a spiritual, not religious program, right? And what you choose to call your higher power, you can choose, but it is a spiritual program.
Yeah.
You know, like you need to be able to free yourself spiritually, but also physically. Like how people are going to take, you know, what you're doing with your life, like that's on them.
Yeah.
The part is for you. Like it's, it is. It's as much as it's a giving program, it's a selfish program.
Yeah.
Right?
No,
It's
100%.
because, you know, we can only give out like what we allow ourselves to have first, you know, and that's the biggest part for me. It's like, I see people in recovery and doing all these things. And I didn't feel like I was worth having that.
Yeah.
With my past and my history, it's just, you know, don't you know who I am? Like, I'm not.
Yeah, I know I suffer from that too. And like feeling unworthy of the things that I even have today, you know, and not being able to take back some of those things that I've done, you know, and the only way I can like work through it is by living in amends to the past, right? And by being a good person today and walking with God and trying to live righteously to the best of my ability. And when I'm wrong, admit it, you know, and like try to change, you know, and try to do something with my life. And it is, you know, a selfish program. And even like in the 9th step, when we're making amends to these people, it doesn't even matter if they accept your apology.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
I'm saying sorry for me.
Yeah, right. Right.
It doesn't matter if you accept it or not. Like I have to say sorry for me.
Yeah.
I have to take ownership of the things that I've done so that I can move forward. Whether you agree and support me in that or not, it doesn't really matter. Because
you can't convince people that you're genuine.
Right.
You know, you only know if you're genuine. It kind of lets you let go of that like control of it, right? Like I need them to believe. Like I've made amends before outside of recovery, and it's like I've got to convince them, you know, that I'm serious. And it's not about you convincing them, like with where you're at in your heart, like whether they choose to take you as genuine or not. Yeah. If you are being genuine, then that's what it is. Yeah. And yeah, man, that unworthiness even too with being a dad. You know, I fall short consistently and like trying to be better, you know. And I've, you know, self-love is a big thing, you know, even with the life I've built today and progress I've made. You know, my sponsor, you know, tells a story about his sponsor, you know, putting something on the mirror saying, I love you. So he tells himself, I love you every day. And he was telling me this story where he said, you know, I'm telling myself I love you every day, but I don't believe it. And he said, well, why don't you try doing this? Go up in the mirror and tell yourself, I know you don't believe this right now, but I know somewhere deep inside you that you love you. You know, and he took that to the mirror and he could believe that because he believes somewhere deep inside. So like the people that struggle with self-worth, right? Sometimes it's not making these huge leaps and bounds. Like it doesn't overnight happen like self-worth and self-love, but it's being able to make small decisions and small actions to make those baby steps to build up to that point. Like this is an overnight program, you know? Yeah. And so it's what I try to do today, especially with being a parent and being like a partner, you know, or even at work, right? Like as an addict, I want things to happen immediately. Yeah. Overnight, I want instant gratification, but I have to combat that because that's not life. Yeah. Life doesn't happen overnight, you know? So.
Yeah. No, it's a good point. How has your faith grown through sobriety, and how has your, you know, your spiritual journey unfolded?
So I know for me, I cannot stay clean through my own will. Yeah. And so that relies me to rely on God more. Now, don't get me wrong, there's been steps to this journey where I get right back into self-will, you know, and fall flat on my face and call out to God to come pick me up and dust me off. But the more that I'm able to rely on God, the more that I'm able to see that he always comes through. It might not be in my timing, right? But when I take things to him, he's ready to take it on. Yeah. You know, and it takes, gosh, that is freeing in itself, you know, because I get this idea in my head sometimes that like I have to move all the pieces around and configure this around to make this all happen. And
trying to control.
Yeah. And he calls on us to call on him.
Yeah.
For him to take it. And the more that I'm able to do that, that's the other part of the peace, right? It's not just that peace from my past and with who I am, but just knowing that I'm going to be taken care of, and not to have these expectations on what that looks like, right? Because my own idea of what I think my life should look like probably isn't the idea that God has for my life, right? Yeah. Like every idea that I've had of what I thought my life should look like or will look like, I might get those things, but internally I'm bankrupt. I would way rather have peace and serenity and joy in my heart than any of the material things that I have. Like that far outweighs it. And so I've got this thing at work because my job is stressful. So I got this new job lately. It's more money than I've ever been paid before. Great benefits, all these things. I've got to drive to West Sac every day. That's the only downside, but it's stressful. I'm working multiple jobs, running a crew of guys, and I found myself like running around with a chicken with its head cut off sometimes, and I'm just like, ugh. And so I put this sign up in there, and it says, "Pause. ... Have you prayed about it?" And so I try to read that sign as much as I can every day, because subconsciously sometimes I'm just taking things on, and while I need to put effort and action behind certain things to make things happen, the spinning, the endless loops in my head of going through this and going through that. That's what breaks me down. And when I can take it to God with those things, it just kind of frees me. It's like a breath of fresh air, know?
Let him, have the wheel.
Yeah.
Right? Like stop trying to control everything.
Yeah.
And, that peace that you get from having that faith, and like having the faith that I don't know where this is going to take me. I don't know what the outcome is going to be. It doesn't even really matter what the outcome is going to be because I'm trying to live in God's will. Right. And trying to do the next right thing and walk in his will. And it doesn't really matter what the outcome is because it's for his glory wherever we're going here. You know what I mean? And it's not always easy, but when you can walk in that faith that you're taken care of and that it's going to work out the way that it's supposed to work out, it relieves a lot of that stress of trying to control everything, especially when you relieve yourself of the stress of expectation and outcome. You know what I mean? Because that's a huge thing, is like we have all these expectations and then people don't live up to the expectations, and all of a sudden you feel let down by people or by, experiences and blah, blah, blah. But like, if you're just trying to do the next right thing and are putting one foot in front of the other and are living, optimistically and are walking hand in hand with God and like staying in prayer and being of service and like living righteously, doors will be open for you. People will come into your life. Opportunities will be presented and you'll be able to take advantage of those blessings. You know what I mean? Whereas if you're trying to control everything and you're only living for self, oftentimes I'm not able to take advantage of those blessings. I'll squander opportunities because I get in my own way, by drugs and alcohol usually, but even more than that, just the self-will, and pleasure seeking and what can I get out of this? Right. You know what I mean? Like, how can I benefit from the situation? And I try not to live like that today. And the more I try to be of service and like not live for self, but try to align my will with God's will. And for me, that looks like service and being, a sacrifice to my family and to my community, and not put myself first in situations, the better my life gets anyways.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The more I put God first and other people first, the more I'm blessed.
It's the byproduct.
It's just a byproduct of it. You know what I mean? And those are all things that I've learned through sobriety.
Yeah.
And if you work these steps to the best of your ability and honestly, and like leave no stone unturned and, really, really give it a solid go, you will have a spiritual experience as a result of that, and we have a daily reprieve contingent on that spiritual progress, right? So we have to stay connected and continue on that path. And the way that we do that in recovery is by helping other people, right? In that 12th step.
Right.
And like being of service. And how has service changed your life and changed your recovery?
So service is like my secret weapon, right? Like it's like that movie where there's like 8 bad dudes in front of one dude and he pulls out like this super gun and you're just like, oh, these guys are screwed. You know, that's how it is for me because service, for one, it gets me out of myself. Every single time it gets me out of myself. And I don't know, like I went in and was a service over at FFR on Friday. And just to put in an example, I gotten off a little early. And of course, my thinking goes with, well, you got time to go home and take a nap first. You know, even though I know they're already there setting up, they can use my help, right? I'm like, oh, I can go take a nap first. I'm like, no, I'm just going to go over and show up. And, dude, the minute I'm in service with whatever it is, like, it takes me out of me and it just leaves me so free and happy. Like, I feel like I'm doing God's work. You know, when I'm not getting anything out of it, like, dude, leading back to self-worth. Like, if you're looking for the biggest self-worth motivator, it's service, whether it's chairing a meeting, secretarying a meeting, doing the coffee commitment, taking out the trash, like to feel like you're helping and not expecting anything out of it. Yeah.
It makes you feel good.
Dude, it's like really the one thing that can always get me out of me. Yeah. You know, and like it always comes back down to being selfish, right? Like it's like I might go and be of service to try to think I'm being a nice guy, but ultimately like I'm going to service because it changes the way that I feel in a good way, you know, like it ends up becoming a habit and a trait, right? Where I'm like, oh yeah, I'll go and help out. But it's because I know that when I'm of service, I feel more free. And like, you were talking about, like being in the present, right? And like, I always come up with this, you know, it's not really an analogy, but like when I'm in self-will and I'm looking at like the new TV or the new car, right? And I'm like, oh, I need to get that. And then when I get that, it's, well, I need to get the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, you know, and when I'm able,
it's never enough.
It's never enough. Right. And so when I'm able to, you know, be of service and be in God's will, like those things just show up for me. But the more important thing is that I get to be present during those moments. Like when I'm in service, I get to be present. I'm not thinking about tomorrow or thinking about the bills or thinking about this new job that's coming up or, you know, that guy that cut me off on the freeway or whatever it is. Like I'm in service, I'm there. Yeah. You know, and if I'm not there, I try to ground myself, maybe do a little meditation to just get me there because it's the greatest opportunity is to be present, you know. And as our lives get busier, you know, you get a little bit of clean time, like your life will fill up. All these things will start happening for you and you'll feel that pull to go and, you know, do your own thing, get out of service, stop being present, start future tripping. And it's like, you know, the future will worry about itself. That's what Jesus said, you know. And so it's a great opportunity to be present with being in service.
Yeah, no, for sure. One of the things too is like we are searching for purpose, you know, and that's one of the great things about recovery is that you can, like, oftentimes in our addiction, we're just out there like wandering around, no direction, feel like we have no purpose in life, you know? And when you come into recovery and you become of service, you automatically become part of something greater than yourself. And you find purpose in your life through service, you know? And it feels good to be part of something, to be part of a community, to be part of something that's greater than yourself. And it gets you outside of your own head and like you feel good by being part of something that's worth meaning. You know what I mean?
Well, and just to battle the self-centered nature of the disease in terms of, I'm going to do this. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Right. You know, when we're giving of ourselves freely, you know, we get to feel a part of, you know, we get that purpose. You're absolutely right when it comes to purpose. You know, we're always searching for that. Yeah. And you find that when you're being of service.
Yeah. So what's some advice you would give to somebody that's new in recovery or that is maybe on the track on Suboxone and like wants to take that next step?
So being new to recovery, first off, having a higher power is huge. You know, finding God is huge. If you're not there yet, remember that it starts with hope.
Yeah.
So when you have hope, it doesn't mean that you firmly believe that this is solid, this is wood right here. But that because you said it's wood and that I trust you, that, oh, this might be wood, right? Hope is what turns the faith. Mm-hmm. So you don't just go overnight from faith. So give yourself a little grace and find that hope. That if you're having trouble believing that you're going to stay clean, if you're having trouble believing that you can get off Suboxone, like I'm here to tell you that it starts with the hope that I believe you can do it. Mm. And so you can just believe that I believe, right? It doesn't have to be this huge leap and bound and overnight you're committed, right? But it starts with that baby step. Yeah. And then going forward, make as many meetings as you can. You know, meetings is where I found my safe space. It's a place that I could go no matter what. It's a place where I could talk to that person about what I'm going through this week. And then the next day they're like, oh, hey, how's that going? You know, people who actually care, you know, people are in the same boat as I am. I found out that I wasn't crazy in Narcotics Anonymous. You know, I found out that my thoughts weren't so far-fetched, that I wasn't alone. The disease was trying to tell me that you're a crappy person for thinking this way or whatever it is. And in there, I heard somebody else share about it. So it's being able to find as many meetings as you can and then being able to connect with people, say hi to somebody that you don't know, right. You know, go around and introduce yourself, you know, because going into a room full of people that you don't know, the impact that it's going to have versus you knowing a few people's names. Because I guarantee that those people, when they see you coming in, at least, you know, the addicts that I hang out with, they're going to come up and say, hi, how you doing? How are you doing today? You know, it was good to see you again. And you feel this sense of belonging, because that's another thing that we can struggle with, right? Yeah. Is if we belong. And the next thing is going to be able to get into service. So people have service commandments at meetings, right? You can't be a chairperson or you can't be a secretary for this long or what have you. But I guarantee you can get a coffee position or a trash position or a greeter position, right? The person that's out there introducing themselves. Greeter position is a great chance for you to meet new people. Yeah. You know, and it's just a chance to feel connected, right? Most of us don't want to get outside of our little shell and our comfort zone.
That was the hardest thing for me.
Dude, but isn't it worth it? Like you meet people, they recognize you.
I had to force myself to shake hands, you know? And you have to be willing, right? Yeah. Do whatever it takes. And part of that is being willing to be uncomfortable and open up and meet people.
Yeah. And the other part of it is finding somebody you trust and doing what's suggested. Right. You know, not to say that everybody in recovery, right, is sending out, you know, the word of God, but I'm telling you, there's people in there that knows what they're doing, and when they make suggestions, those suggestions are just like subtle commands, right? It's saying like, hey, you want to get clean, you need to do this. Yeah. You know, it's just
do what people that are clean are doing.
Exactly. So follow their guidelines, you know, and you know, if you're struggling with Suboxone and you're wanting to get off that, share your story out there. You know, I guarantee you nobody's going to judge you. You just say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm looking for. Yeah. And see if you can find somebody that's been through it. Or maybe somebody that's on it and is cutting down or whatever it looks like. But it's one of those things that I promise you can be done. Yeah. It's just about being able to stay plugged in as much as you can, because when we're alone, we fail. You know? And those voices can come really loud, and it can drive you to isolate. So it's not worth it. So, you know, make as many meetings as you can, be of service, you know, being able to share openly, meet new people. All of these things help combat the disease. Yeah. You know, so.
Yeah. Well, awesome, man. Thanks for coming out. And, you know, I'm proud of you, bro. And, you know, I'm grateful to be in your life. And I'm excited to see, you know, what the future has for us. So,
yeah, likewise, Blaine.
Yeah. Thanks, bro.
I love you, bro.
Love you too.
Victorious we became, but never forgot where we came from. Life or death, not a game. We came to change the lane. Recovery addicts, that's the name. Give yourself a break, just one day at a time. You were born to shine, so live and let love be forever. My sister, my brother, don't give in. Please remember, the lie is dead. We do recover. Welcome home.